Welcome back to C++ Fundamental course. Today we are going to discuss the concept of variable scope, fundamental aspect of programming. Understanding variable scope is crucial for writing clean, efficient, and bug-free code. Variable scope refers to the region of program where a variable is accessible and can be used. Variables in C++ can have local and global scope. Let's start with the local scope. Variables declared inside the block or function are local to that block or function. As an example, let's write a function that calculates the circumference of circle. So my function will return double and I will name it circumference. And the parameter of my function will be double variable radius. And inside of my function, I'm going to create double variable pi equal to pi. And my function will return the next expression, 2 multiplied by pi multiplied by radius. Okay, so you can see that here we have two variables inside of our function circumference. Radius, that is also a parameter of my function, and the variable I created inside of the block of the code of my function, inside of this curly brackets that restricts the code of my function pi. Now let's make an experiment and check if we can reach these two variables from our main function. I'm just trying to type pi from the main function. Let's build our program. And you can see the message error. Pi wasn't declared in the scope. That's because pi is a local variable for our function circumference. It can be accessible only inside of the block of the code of this function, inside of the curly brackets, after I declared this variable pi. Now let's also try to reach our parameter of our function radius, and let's build our program. And you can see we have the same error message. Radius wasn't declared in the scope. So the parameters of the function are also local parameters, local variables of this function. Okay, now let's add one more function to our code. Let's say I want to write a function that will return the area of the circle. So I'm going to create different function. It will return double and I will name it circle area. And it will also have parameter radius. And to calculate the circle area, I also need the variable pi. But now instead of creating another pi variable with the same value, I will create the global scope variable. So what is global scope? Variables declared outside of any function or block have global scope and can be accessed throughout the program. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this variable and declare it outside of any function, any block of the code, just after the library and namespace std. Now let's delete declaration of pi inside of our function. And also let's finish our function circle area. So circle area will return pi multiplied by radius square. So radius. Okay, and now let's check if everything is working. So inside of our main function, let's write this message pi is equal to, and let's write pi end line. And now let's build our program again. And you can see I make here typo. Okay, now let's build it again. And everything is correct. And if now I run my program, you can see the result. Pi is equal to our global variable. Now let's also check that our functions are working too. So let's declare variable radius equal to 1. And let's type the next message. Circumference of circle with radius and the value of our radius is equal to, and here let's call for our function circumference and line. And let's do the same for the circle area. Area of circle with radius is equal to, and here we are going to call our function circle area. Okay, now let's build this code and check that everything is okay. And once again, I made a typo in the word radius. Now let's fix it. Okay, I guess I fixed all typos. Now let's build it again. And our program is successfully built. Now let's run and check the result. And you can see our result. Pi is equal to pi. Circumference of circle with radius 1 is equal to this value, and area of circle with radius 1 is equal to this value. So I hope now you understand the difference between local and global variable. If some variable is declared inside of the block of the code, inside of curly brackets, it can be accessible only inside of these curly brackets after we declared this variable. But if we declared variable outside of any function, any block of the code, like here we declared double pi, you can see that now this variable has global scope, so it can be accessible in any function in any block of the code. So now, since the global variable is available everywhere in our program, the logical question arises: can this variable be changed anywhere in the program? And the answer is yes. Since our variable now is accessible everywhere, you can also change it anywhere in our program. Let's, for example, make the next experiment. I'm going to type our variable pi, and then I'm going to call for some function. Let's call for our function circumference. And inside of this function, I'm going to change the value of our variable pi. Let's set pi equal to 3. And after we did it, let's now repeat our message pi is equal to, and let's check if now after we call this function inside of which we change the global variable pi, if our pi is now different. Let's build and run our program. Okay, I forgot here to name variable. Let's build and run our program again. First, you can see pi is equal to the value I initialized it with, and after I called for the function that change pi is different. Our global variable is different. So sometimes it can be a very useful feature. Sometimes you indeed need global variable that can be changed anywhere in the code. But if you want to avoid these changes, if you want your global variable be constant, if you want to protect your global variable from changes, you should use keyword const to declare this variable as constant. I'm going to write const double pi, and this keyword const will make my global variable constant, and now it can't be changed anywhere in the code. If now I try to build my program, you can see I'm getting error, assignment for read-only variable pi. So because our variable pi now is constant, it's read-only, and you can't assign new variable, and you will get this type of the error. So when you want to protect your global variable from changes, use this keyword const to make your global variable constant. In summary, understanding variable scope is essential for writing well-organized and readable code. But sometimes we may be faced with a situation when we have two variables, global and local, with the same name. Let's, for example, here create global variable radius, and it will be equal to 100. And let's remove this assignment, we don't need it anymore. And let's say inside of our main function, I also created another variable with the same name, radius, and it's equal to 17. So how can I now specify which exactly variable I want to access? My local one or my global one? And to do this, we need to use unary scope resolution operator. So if now I want to access my local variable, the local variable I declared inside of this block of the code, I need to write as is, local variable is, and the name of our local variable radius and line. But if now I want to access global variable, our global variable radius would equal to 100, I need to use this unary scope resolution operator, which is colon, and once again write the name of the global variable and line. Okay, let's now build and run this code and check if it's working. And you can see the result. Local variable is 17, so when I call the variable as is, radius, I use local variable. But when I use this unary scope resolution operator, colon, I can access global variable, our global variable radius that is equal to 100. But of course, you need to remember that the best practice is to avoid double naming. So when you give names to your parameters, to your variables, it's always better just to use different names. Rename your local variable instead of using these unary scope operators, because it will make your code more readable and more clean. At the end of this lesson, let's talk about another very important variety of local scope. It's a block scope. If variable is declared within the block of the code, for example, inside of the loop or if-else statement, they have a block scope and they can be accessible only inside of this block of the code. Okay, so for example, let's create here for loop, and let's say inside of my for loop, I want to calculate the circumference of several circles with different radius. So the radius will vary from 1 to 5, I++, and inside of my loop, I'm going to calculate the circumference. Double C is equal to circumference of I. Okay, and if now I will try to type here message inside of my for loop, let's say the message will be perimeter of circle with radius, and our radius I is equal to, and our variable C and line. If now I try to build and run this program, you can see the result. Perimeter of circle with radius 1 is equal to, and here's all our calculations. But if now I try to extract this message and type it outside of our for loop, so I'm going to try to reach my variable I and my variable C outside of the for loop. Let's try to build this program. And you can see here we have error, variable I and C not declared in this scope. So this variable I, the tracing variable of our for loop, as well as the variable C I created inside of the block of my for loop, has block scope. These variables, I and C, can be accessible only inside of this block of the scope, inside of these curly brackets of my for loop. Now let's create some example with the if statement. Let's say I create a variable radius equal to 5, and I'm going to create next if statement. If r is equal to 3, let's say in this case I want to calculate the circle area. So in this case I'm going to create variable double area is equal to circle area of our radius. Okay, now let's check if this variable area we created inside of the curly brackets, inside of the block of the code of if statement, is accessible outside this block of the code. If I try to type area to the console outside of the if statement block code, let's build our code now, and you can see that once again we get the error. Area wasn't declared in the scope. So once again, since we created variable area inside of the block of if statement, this variable can be accessible only inside of this block, inside of these curly brackets. Outside of this block of the code, this variable is not accessible. Okay guys, this is it. I hope this lesson was very interesting for you. We learned the difference between local and global variable scope. We also discussed block variable scope. We learned unary scope resolution operator and keyword constant. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer in the comment section, and see you in the next lesson.